Ladies and gentlemen, this is probably the most important video I think I've ever made. But before I get onto the main video, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. And if you really want to support the work that I do, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below. So the actual purpose of the video is to basically dunk on the legacy media. I say dunk because let us not forget that the media's role is to keep South Africans informed so that they can better understand the events going on in their country. If things are going really bad, we all basically want to know what's going on, right? So we can hold our politicians to account because after all, we live in a democracy. And in a democracy, if you cannot hold your executive to account because you don't know what they're doing, then there's not really much point in having a democracy. Why this becomes important is because the legacy media appears to have shifted from keeping individuals informed to engaging in forms of political activism. And their tools to do this appear to be that of manufactured outrage. We are constantly seeing it in a number of areas. Now, as an individual, I know that when I read the news, I also click on what you might describe as clickbaity type headlines. Headlines that basically manufacture a degree of feeling. In fact, in many media outlets, they're trained to do that. Use the feeling, use something that's personal, use something that connects with the audience. And so they inevitably end up using points of outrage. That's why most people feel deeply outraged by their government and their country. Now, to be clear, as they say, South Africa is a beautiful place. You don't hate South Africa. You hate its politics. Right? And you hate its politics because you're told that its politics are toxic. And in many instances, to be frank, they are. But let us start considering something. Let us use the case of Renaldo. So Renaldo apparently was very racist because he made a video in which he called for the killing of K people, see how that worked, and he upset a large amount of individuals. The video itself was circulated around 10 or 12 years ago. I mean, it was a long time ago when Renaldo was young and stupid. And if you've actually seen the video, Renaldo looks like he's probably going through a degree of roid rage. And at that point in time, Renaldo was a bodybuilder, most likely on roids. But hey, we were all young and dumb once. Now, ROL ran a news article against Renaldo in order to manufacture outrage. And this occurred shortly after he was appointed as an MP. An outrage they caused. Outrage that spread to numerous other news outlets and eventually ultimately led to other political parties doing their own forms of denouncements, for want of a better word. A good example of that was the EFF, because let us not forget, the EFF thrives on manufactured outrage. In fact, to a large degree, it is the party of outrage. Well, you see, the reason that this becomes important is that Renaldo was ultimately suspended from Parliament. He was suspended, not by Parliament, but actually by the political party, the DA. The DA at the time was forming a GNU and didn't really want the Renaldo issue to derail the negotiations, which many speculated that potentially IOL had manufactured the outrage in order to derail the GNU negotiations. Now let us consider the actual impact of this. Renaldo was subjected to a visit by the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission laid court actions against Renaldo in the Port Elizabeth courts, and ultimately Renaldo's had his life turned upside down. He's had journalists hound him, he's not been able to leave the house, and his own business ventures and his own livelihood have been threatened by the manufactured outrage that was caused. And why do I keep calling it manufactured outrage? And that is because the press ombud has now ruled that IOL breached clauses 1.8, 1.9, 2.1, and 10.2 in relation to the publication of this video. So what do those clauses actually mean? Well, what they actually mean is that IOL deliberately doctored the video in order to create a degree of outrage. In other words, they were not impartial. They did it for a political reason. So what was the upshot of this? Well, IOL were told that they must apologize to Renaldo for manufacturing a political story, because it was a political story. Now, you see, in the world of politics, this is what we would have called political hyperbole. However, when it comes through to media outlets, we expect to take things at face value. In other words, we expect to read the facts without any form of bias. Now, of course, everybody has their own degree of bias, but let us now shift that onto an article which was written by the Daily Maverick by Rebecca Davies. This article, now about Rahman, basically argues that Rahman should not have been appointed as the chief of staff for John Steenhuisen because he's a hard right-winger who believes in monarchy and doesn't believe in a constitution and says spicy things online whilst using a high degree of political hyperbole. Because you see, Rahman makes it very clear that he intends to use shock values in order to achieve an outcome. That is, in order to make people understand what exactly is going on in their country. He doesn't hold himself out to be non-partisan. People know very well that he's conservative. He makes it very clear to individuals, as do I. But you see, the media attempts to punish him. You see, one time he spoke to an anti-Semite, and therefore he must be guilty by association. This form of ad hominem argument is rather low, because what it effectively does is it means that if you are an authentic individual who has an opinion of your own, at some point in time, somebody will attempt to hold you to account for that. They will attempt to, in other words, beat you over the head for your own opinions. People should not be censored for having a viewpoint. Viewpoints are the norm. Sitting there as an NPC and just following a mainstream narrative is not. That's being a sheep. But you see, these mainstream media outlets these days all claim to want to be classical liberals. Use the example of Gabriel Krauss, a good example from the RRR, who says, I'm a classical liberal. In liberalism, we all have our own ideas, and that's okay because it's a battle of ideas. But you, Rahman, have a different idea to me, and you don't think people should be liberals, and ergo, I don't like you, and therefore you should be cancelled. Come on. That's not liberal now, is it? It's funny how the liberals are always the ones who want to silence their oppositions, whilst telling you that it's the oppositions who want to silence them. This, unfortunately, does not become degrees of impartiality. This is political activism. And that is what the media has become. So why is this problematic? Well, it's problematic because the media tells me that Jacob Zuma, as an example, is highly corrupt. But is he? I don't know. Can I still trust your impartiality? I'm told that John Schlaupe is a really, really bad guy because he has very extreme views. I'm told that Julius Malema would commit genocide on the drop of a hat. But would he? Or is it just political activism? Maybe they just don't like the EFF. Maybe they don't like MK. Maybe they just don't like Jacob Zuma. I mean, I'm told that Cyril Ramaphosa is the best president the Republic's ever seen. He was majestic, as Adrian Basson once said. At the end of the day, this is not independence. This is political activism. And ultimately, it destroys the very fabric of democracy itself. I cannot hold the executive to account if I don't know what they're doing. So you may say, well, how does this all impact things? Well, let's look at the manufactured outrage that was manufactured against Ramon Kamenak. Let us not forget how the actual article came about as they were interviewing John Steenhuisen and happened to see Ramon. Ramon said some comments about, oh, look, yes, I work, yeah, okay, yeah, fine. And they wrote an article about it. And that article was originally in the Afrikaans News. From the Afrikaans News, it went to News 24. From News 24, it went to IL. From IL, it went to Daily Maverick. And from the Daily Maverick, it went to the lips of the EFF, who then wrote a denouncement about Rahman, because how outrageous it is that he would be appointed. Do you see how manufactured outrage works? It all started with a simple article of, why are you here? Oh, you got a job here? Okay. And the argument against Rahman is that somehow he's right-wing. And you may say, well, I don't like Rahman. Who cares what happens to him? And to a large degree, I would have to agree. I'm not here to defend Rahman. That's not the point. What I am here to do is to defend the country that I love, South Africa. And what it has to be defended from is the media, because the media are political activists. Now, if they want to be political activists, what they must do is put the political party that they sponsor or promote at the top of their banner. If News 24 is the ANC party, they must put the ANC on top of their banner. News 24 is sponsored by the ANC. If Times Live or the EFF party, go Times Live is sponsored by the EFF. Because at least that way we understand the political bend that you may take when shaping your own narratives and stories. That's all we ask. Let us use another example. And that is, In News 24, they reported a news story that apparently the DA had changed its tune on the NHI since forming the GNU. This is a genuine concern, and is one that we voiced on Morning Shot when the DA joined the GNU. To what degree would the ANC corrupt the DA in order to ensure that their own party policies were pushed through? And this becomes important because Aaron, the Minister of Health, said the NHI will progress whether we have a GNU or not. And that in itself became problematic because what he effectively said is, right, John, you now need to choose. You either choose our party politics or you get lost. That is what we typically refer to in philosophy as brinksmanship. It's the idea of chicken. Which car will swerve first? You shouldn't be doing that to your political allies, and everybody understood it. So then the argument becomes, well, the DA had issued court proceedings against the ANC's NHR. Once the actual bill was signed, will they continue? And you see, John has taken a diplomatic approach, which he would do. He's a politician, and the diplomatic approach says that by negotiating or discussing the NHR, we may be able to achieve a better outcome. And yes, everybody knows that litigation should always be the last resort. Negotiation should be the first. Why is this important? Well, because Helen Zille then had to come out and say on social media, their positions have not changed. They are still taking the government to court. So what was their original position? Well, their original position, as we even said on the show, was that largely they actually supported the NHR. What they didn't support was the banning of the private sector. What they wanted is what we currently have, a two-tier system. In other words, we have the state-sponsored system and the private system, with the two competing against each other in order to get a better outcome for the average South African. Makes sense. But you see, the NHI doesn't do that. They aim to centralize the funds and ban the private sector. So largely, the DA does support universal healthcare, just not in the centralized communist type idea that the ANC do. And a negotiated position would be to say, how about don't ban the private sector, we'll support the rest of the NHR. That is most likely the DA's position. But you see, that's not as juicy, is it? What we really want to do is we want to portray the DA as having gone into bed with the ANC to the point that they are the ANC now. I mean, they're no longer the opposition, they're just a section of the ANC, if you will, faction of the ANC. And that, my friends, is what we call political activism. It is not impartial. Now, I myself think that the DA is highly likely to be corrupted by working with the DA. And actually, if I think about it logically, the whole GNU is a very nice way to corrupt your political opponents and basically make them one of us. But that is my opinion. That is not fact. It is not journalism. Journalism is to present you with the facts and allow you to make up your own mind based on the facts that are presented to you. That is not what the journalistic class are currently engaged in, and it's becoming problematic because we are no longer sure in this republic what we can believe and who we can believe. And when that happens, democracy itself fails. And we know this to be true because people are no longer voting. Right around the world, they no longer vote. And that is because they have no faith in the institutions that they are voting for. Because everybody understands everything all the time is just political activism, and it's tiring, and people don't want that. So, my friends, what's the outcome of all this? Well, the only outcome that I can give you is that you should probably start to consider independent news outlets and smaller outlets that don't have a degree of political affiliation. It's the only way to get your news from a reliable source. It's unfortunate. It's a lot more work. It does mean that we actually have to work to being informed. But what's the alternative? Being lied to? Being constantly outraged to the point where you want to immigrate because somebody made you upset with a fake news article? This can't continue. And to a large degree, it shouldn't. I don't really know what to say. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with one clip from George Orwell. But you can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time.
You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you've demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?
I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.